From the Liquify filter, you can use the warp tool to push and pull pixels, but if you hold Alt as you paint, you will reconstruct those areas. As you move a layer, it sometimes may inadvertently snap to another object. This could be very annoying, but it's easy to fix. Hold Ctrl as you drag to temporarily prevent Photoshop from snapping. With the Clone Stamp tool, you can hold Alt and click to set a sample source. Then you can paint with those sampled pixels. But did you know that if you hold Alt, Shift, and tap the bracket keys, you can scale the sample source? The left bracket key scales down. When I paint, I get a scaled down version of the sampled pixels. And you can hold Alt, Shift, and tap on the greater than or less than key to rotate the sampled pixels. To reset, go into Window, Clone Source, then click the Reset button. I have a lot more pro-level Photoshop keyboard shortcuts you're probably not using, but before we get to them, I should let you know that I'm working with my MSI Creator Z17 HX Studio laptop, and I will call out the Windows shortcuts, but the graphic on screen will show the Mac keyboard shortcuts as well. And check out the link below, you'll find my written post, a free graphic to help you learn the basic Photoshop keyboard shortcuts, and more info on the MSI Creator Z17. My name is Jesus Ramirez, let's get started. When you go into Edit, Puppet Warp, you can click over your image to place these pins. Then you can drag the pins to reposition her body. With a pin selected, hold Alt to reveal a circle overlay and drag to rotate it. This shortcut gives you more control over your distortions. When you hold Alt and click on the layer thumbnail, Photoshop will zoom in to fit the entire content of this layer on screen, helping you see what a layer contains. Most movie and TV posters I work on are huge Photoshop files. For example, this poster I made for the TV show The Deadliest Catch is 7.4 gigabytes. I had to use a PSB since PSDs only have a file size limit of 2 gigabytes. Opening a file this size or larger could take some time, especially on slower machines. If you only need to see the image to show to a client or share on social media, open the flattened version by going into File, Open, clicking on the document you want to open, then hold Shift, Alt, and click on the Open button. Photoshop will ask to read the composite data instead. Press OK, and a flattened version of the file will open. A big warning here. Saving the document will override the original file and you will lose all your layers. Instead, export the file by pressing Shift-Ctrl-Alt-W. Don't use the eraser tool when painting in Photoshop. The brush tip will not be the same, making it look pretty bad when you erase. Instead, hold down the tilde key as you paint, which is on the top left next to the number 1. This shortcut will allow you to erase with your currently active brush, giving you better results. If you're using an older version of Photoshop, press Alt-Shift-R to switch the brush's blending mode to clear, allowing you to erase with the currently active brush. Also, as you paint, you can tap on the right arrow key to rotate the brush tip clockwise, or tap on the left arrow key to rotate counterclockwise. Notice how both the brush preview and the angle input box reflect these changes as I tap on these keys. When you're painting, there is no need to switch over to the Eyedropper tool. Just hold Alt to enable the Eyedropper tool temporarily, and you can click to select any color from your image. Here's another cool trick. You can minimize the Photoshop application frame, hold Alt to enable the Eyedropper tool, click inside the canvas, and drag out. This will allow you to select colors from outside of Photoshop, including your browser. Then you can paint with the color you chose. This next keyboard shortcut gave me so many headaches when I was learning Photoshop. If you have a painting tool active and press the caps lock key, the brush preview will disappear and you will only see a crosshair. I spent so much time trying to figure out what happened to my brush preview the first time I came across this feature. I thought there was something wrong with Photoshop. I even uninstalled it several times trying to get it to work. It was so frustrating, and back then, there was no YouTube to look for solutions. But remember, if you see the crosshair cursor, tap the caps lock key to bring back the brush preview. There is no need to uninstall Photoshop. If you wanted to select the iris, you can start by enabling the elliptical marquee tool from the toolbar or pressing Shift-M. Holding the Shift key, as you press a toolbar shortcut will toggle between the nested tools. Then, you could hold Shift and drag to create a perfect circle around the iris. If necessary, hold the spacebar to move the selection as you're making it. I'm currently holding the mouse button, Shift, and the spacebar. After you release the mouse button, we can subtract from this selection using an intersection. Hold Alt and Shift. Notice the X icon on the cursor. The X indicates that we are now intersecting the selection. Drag to create a circle around the top and bottom of the eye. Again, you can hold the spacebar to move the selection as you make it. When you release, the selected pixels will only be those inside your second selection, giving you a perfect selection around the iris. By the way, if these Photoshop keyboard shortcuts are helpful to you, hit like and subscribe. It really helps out the channel if you do. Sometimes you may need to freehand a selection by using the Lasso tool. You can simply drag over your image to make the selection. But if you reach an area where the Polygonal Lasso tool will be best, you can temporarily switch to it by holding Alt. And then, you can continue making selections by defining straight edges as you click. If you need to go back into the Lasso tool, simply click, hold down the mouse button, and release the Alt key and continue freehanding your selection. When you have a selection active, press Ctrl D to deselect. You can then continue working on your image. Photoshop remembers the last active selection you had. Even after applying several other adjustments, you can bring it back by pressing Ctrl Shift D. There is no need to waste time creating it again. You can load the luminosity of an image by pressing Ctrl Alt 2. This selection targets the bright pixels. If you create a fill layer, you will see that the red pixels appear over the bright areas. To target the dark pixels, load the luminosity again by pressing Ctrl Alt 2, then invert the selection by pressing Ctrl Shift I. When you create a new fill layer, you will see that the blue pixels now target the dark areas. As I mentioned earlier, I'm working with the MSI Creator Z17 HX Studio, the laptop I use to create on the go. It has the latest 13th generation Intel i9 HX CPU and the NVIDIA RTX 4070 Studio. You can do so much with it, including editing high-resolution videos, 3D design, and of course, edit in Photoshop. The screen is a 17-inch Quad HD resolution IPS display covering 100% of the DCI P3 color profile, making it perfect for color-accurate tasks. It has a 16:10 golden ratio, so you get a larger working area, which I always need. It also has a touchscreen, so you could use your finger or the MSI pen. I've been using this laptop for almost a year and have no issues. MSI is currently running a promotion, so it's the perfect time to get a new laptop. Check out the link below for all the details. When you create a selection, press the Q key to enter the quick mask mode. By default, anything that is red is not selected. You can then paint with white to select or paint with black to deselect. Then you can press the Q key again to return to the marching ants. Best of all, you can apply filters to the quick mask. For example, after creating a selection, press Q, then go into Filter, Blur, and choose Gaussian Blur. This will give you a visual representation of how a feather or blur will affect the edges of the selection. When you apply the blur, you can press Q again to return to the selection, and when I create a mask, you will see the blurred edges. By the way, this is my preferred method to feather a selection, but there's actually a shortcut to do it as well. After creating a selection, press Shift F6 to bring up the feather selection window. Then type in a blur amount and press OK. The downside here is that you don't get a visual representation of how the feather or blurring affects the selection. Immediately after using most adjustments, filters, or tools, you can press Ctrl Shift F to reduce the effect and in some cases change the blending mode. Keep in mind that the fade command is only available immediately after you apply your changes. If you do anything else in between, including saving, you won't be able to use it. From the toolbar, click on the 3-dot icon and choose Edit Toolbar. Then hold Shift and click on Done. This will add a banana to your toolbar. It doesn't do anything, but it's a fun Easter egg and a good prank to play on a friend. With the Move tool active, Hover over a layer and hold Ctrl to see the bounding box. When you hover outside the layer, you'll see the labels showing the distance between the layer's edge and the canvas's edge. This is a great visual aid to help you align your layers. When working in Photoshop and you feel like you need to start from scratch, don't undo multiple times or close and reopen the file. Instead, press F12 to revert the image to the last time you saved it or how it looked when you first opened it. When multiple documents are open, you can press Ctrl-Alt-P to close all but the currently active document. I use the following keyboard shortcut all the time. I like to call it the Whoopsie-Daisy Key because when you're working in Photoshop and you make a mistake, or a whoopsie-daisy as I like to call it, you can press the Escape key to exit, making it all good. For example, if you're using the crop tool and decide you no longer want to crop, press the Escape key to exit the crop overlay. Or if you open a dialog box by mistake, hit Escape to close it without applying the adjustment. It even works on the start screen when you first open Photoshop. You can just hit Escape to close it. Talking about whoopsie-daisies, if things go wrong and you have to reset the Photoshop preferences, press Ctrl-Alt-Shift immediately after clicking to open Photoshop. And I mean immediately after. You have to be fast. If you do it right, this window will come up and ask you if you want to delete the Photoshop setting file. If you click yes, you will delete all your custom settings and preferences, including workspace, tool settings, and other configurations. On most dialog boxes, you can hold the Alt key to turn the Cancel button into a Reset button. Clicking on it will reset the settings to what they were when you first opened it. With the Move tool, you can press Ctrl-R to enable the rulers. Then you can drag from the rulers to create these visual aids that do not show up in your final image called guides. If you hold Alt and click on a vertical guide, Photoshop will turn it into a horizontal guide. And if you hold Alt and click on a horizontal guide, it will turn it into a vertical one. You can hold Alt, Shift, and click on multiple guides to select them. And while holding those keys, you can drag to move them. If you double click on a guide, you will bring up the Preferences panel to the section that controls the settings for all the guides. But if you hold Alt, Shift, and double click on a guide, Photoshop will bring up the Edit Selected Guides dialog box. From here, you can set the color and location. By default, it uses pixels, but you can type percentages, like 75%, and press OK. Photoshop will then place this new red guide 75% away from the left edge. 100% will of course place the guide at the right edge of the canvas. Here's a set of keyboard shortcuts you must commit to memory. Press the D key to set your foreground color and background colors to default, which are black and white. Tapping on the X key swaps your foreground color and background colors. Black is currently my foreground color and white is my background color. If you press Alt and Backspace, you'll fill the entire active layer with the foreground color. If you have an active text or shape layer, it will fill those objects with the foreground color, leaving the transparent areas intact. The same is true when you press Ctrl and Backspace to fill with the background color, which is currently white. But did you know that by adding the Shift key to either of these keyboard shortcuts, you'll only fill the opaque pixels? For example, holding Alt, Shift, and Backspace will fill with black on the pixels that are not transparent. It will no longer fill the entire layer. If you press Ctrl, Alt, Backspace, Photoshop will fill with history. And what is history? If you go into Window, History, you will see these recorded actions called history states. Think about it this way. Anytime you hit undo, you go back one history state. The first history state on top is the original image, what the image was like when it was first open. If you apply a blur to this layer, you will see a new Gaussian blur history state. And if you desaturate the layer by pressing Ctrl-Shift-U, Photoshop will create a new desaturate history state. Now, if you make a selection and fill with history by pressing Ctrl-Alt-Backspace, Photoshop will fill with content from an earlier state of the image. In this case, it uses the original image because that is the history source I have active. This is what this history brush icon represents in this box. But you can move it to any other history state by clicking on the empty space. Now, when you fill with history, Photoshop will use the blurred version of the image to fill before it was desaturated. In the Layers panel, you'll see all your layers. You can hide the currently active layer by pressing Ctrl, and you can enable it again by using the same shortcut. To activate another layer, you can click on it. And you can hold Ctrl and click to select multiple non-consecutive layers. Or you can hold Shift and click on 2 layers, and Photoshop will select all the layers in between. But did you know you could do all this without using your mouse or clicking? You can hold Alt and tap the left bracket key to activate the layer below the currently active layer, and tap the right bracket key to activate the layer above. If you hold Shift, Alt, and tap on the left bracket key, Photoshop will add the layer below to the active selection. And holding Shift, Alt, and tapping on the right bracket key will add the layer above to the active selection. If you want to activate all layers, press Ctrl, Alt, A. When a layer is active, you can drag it up and down the layer stack, but it's faster and more efficient to use keyboard shortcuts. To move a layer up in the layer stack, hold Ctrl and tap on the right bracket key, and tap on the left bracket key to move it down. And if you hold Shift, Ctrl, and tap on the right bracket key, Photoshop will place the layer on top of the layer stack. However, if the layer is inside of a group, it will be placed on top of the stack in the group. Repeat the keyboard shortcut to move it outside of the group and put it on top of the layer stack. If your active layer has a layer mask, you can press Ctrl / to activate it. The focus, the white outline, is now on the mask. This shortcut is the same as clicking on the layer mask thumbnail. To activate the layer, press Ctrl 2, which is the same as clicking on the layer thumbnail. When you have a layer active and no painting tool active, tap on any of the number keys to change the layer's opacity. For example, press 8 to set the opacity to 80%. 0 sets it to 100% opacity. When you quickly tap on 2 keys, Photoshop will apply that number value. For example, 3, 6 will set the opacity to 36%, 9, 4 to 94%, and 0, 0 to 0%. To change the fill, use the same keyboard shortcuts while holding the Shift key. For example, Shift 6 will set the fill to 60%. Press the / key to lock the transparent pixels. Any adjustment you make will only affect the opaque pixels and not the transparent ones. Notice the active icon in the Layers panel. You can click on it if you forget this shortcut. When working professionally, especially in a production environment, you have to name your layers. Here's a shortcut to help you speed up the process. As you edit a layer's name, press the Tab key to move to the layer below and edit its name. Holding Shift and pressing Tab will move you to the layer above. You probably know that you can use keyboard shortcuts to activate a tool. For example, the B key activates the brush tool, the Z key activates the zoom tool, and the W key activates the object selection tool. But you can use spring-loaded shortcuts to temporarily switch to a different tool by holding down its keyboard shortcut. For example, if you're painting with the brush tool, you can press and hold R to switch to the Rotate View tool. Then click and drag to rotate your canvas. Now, you can release the mouse button and release the R key. Photoshop will automatically switch back to the brush tool and you can continue painting. To reset your view, just use the Whoopsie-Daisy Key, which of course is the escape key. It always gets you out of trouble. By the way, if you press Ctrl K, it opens up the Preferences panel. From here, you can go into Tools and change the timing sensitivity for the spring-loaded shortcuts. Pressing Ctrl T allows you to transform a layer, but if you cannot see the transformation handles, press Ctrl 0 to zoom out and see the entire bounding box. With the small white circle selected, press Ctrl T to transform. Then click this checkbox in the Options bar to enable the reference point. Drag it to the center, and type 20 in the rotation input box to rotate the smaller circle 20 degrees from where we place the reference point. Then I'll press Enter to commit the changes. Now I can press Ctrl Alt Shift T, which will duplicate the circle onto a new layer and rotate it 20 degrees from the previous location, still rotating from the center. You can repeat this transformation until you go around the circle. This technique gets even more powerful when you combine it with the ability to do math in input boxes. To see how this feature works, check out my video, 10 genius Photoshop features you didn't know existed. The link is below in the description. Sometimes the canvas color can be distracting from the image you're working on. So you can hold spacebar and tap the F key to toggle between the canvas colors. You can add your own by right-clicking on the canvas and choosing Select Custom Color. But I prefer the presets. To change the entire interface to a new color theme, press Ctrl-Shift-F1 to make the interface darker, and to make it lighter, press Ctrl-Shift-F2. You can do the same thing from the Preferences panel by pressing Ctrl-K. From the Interface tab, under Appearance, choose the color theme you like. Also, here's another fun Easter egg. If you hold Ctrl-Alt-Shift and click on any of the 4 themes, the icons will change to icons of toast bread. Repeat this process and the icons will turn to coffee cups. This has no effect on the look of your interface, but they're fun Easter eggs to look at. To get an extremely precise rotation while using the free transform, go up to the options bar and click inside the rotate field. Then use the up and down arrow keys on your keyboard to rotate the layer in 0.01 degree increments. Holding Shift while pressing the arrow keys will rotate in 0.10 degree increments. When working with curves, you can move the points more precisely by using a keyboard shortcut. Simply select the point you want to move, then tap on the arrow keys on the keyboard to move it. And you can toggle to a different point by tapping the plus key to select the next one up, or the minus key to select the next one down. When you click with the type tool in Photoshop, you'll get dummy text, and you can type anything you like. But did you know you can hold Control to access the transformation handles? When you do, you can move the text layer, rotate, and scale while it remains editable. Has this ever happened to you? You click to create a new text layer, but activate another one instead. If this happens to you, don't create a new layer far away and drag it back. Instead, hold Shift and click. Photoshop will create a new text layer where you clicked, even if another text layer is directly below it. To quickly change the font size, highlight the text, hold Ctrl, Shift, and tap on the greater than key to make the text larger. That's the same key as the period. Or tap the less than key to make it smaller, which is the same key as the comma. From the Properties panel, you have these options to style your text, but it's much faster to use keyboard shortcuts. Start by selecting your text, then style it with one of these keyboard shortcuts. Ctrl-Shift-K to capitalize, Ctrl-Shift-U to underline, Ctrl-Shift-B to bold, and Ctrl-Shift-I to make it italics. By the way, if your typeface has a bold weight or italics, Photoshop will select it from the drop-down when applying these shortcuts. If it doesn't, it will apply a faux bold or italics, which is a simulation of these effects and could create issues like inconsistent weight in slants or printing and rendering problems. I'm not saying not to use them, just something for you to keep in mind. Notice that from the Properties panel, we can see all the formatting buttons enabled that we applied. To quickly reset them all to default, double-click on the text layer thumbnail to select the text, and press Ctrl-Shift-Y. Everything returns to default and all the buttons are now disabled. Now let's adjust the leading, but first expand the character properties by clicking on the 3-dot icon in the Properties panel. The corresponding controls are here. To change the space between the lines, select your text, then hold Alt and tap the down arrow key to increase the space between the lines. And you can tap on the up arrow key while holding Alt to move the text up. Notice the values updating in the Properties panel as I use this keyboard shortcut. Do you see that? If you forget the keyboard shortcut, use this dialog box instead. Now select a few characters. Hold Shift, Alt, and tap up or down on the arrow keys to adjust the baseline shift. It moves the selected characters up and down relative to the baseline of the text. To change the kerning, which is the spacing between two characters, click where you want to create the space. Then hold Alt and tap on the left or right arrow keys to decrease or increase the space. When working with paragraphs, you'll see hyphens breaking up the words. To disable the hyphens, double-click on the text layer thumbnail to select it all. Then press Shift-Alt-Control-H, and you can bring back the hyphens by using the same keyboard shortcut. You can save an HTML file containing a list of all Photoshop keyboard shortcuts, even the custom shortcuts you have set. To open and save this HTML file, press Ctrl-Alt-Shift-K to open the Keyboard Shortcuts panel. Then under the Keyboard Shortcuts tab, press the Summarize button and select the location and name for your file and press Save. And if you made it this far, let me know which shortcut was your favorite. Thanks for watching.